So our final presentation today will come from Liesbet Bussche. Liesbet is an Amsterdam-based jewelry designer who's known for her installations, objects, and printed matter, and at times pieces of jewelry, in which she intertwines urban elements and archetypal jewelry. Her artistic interpretations of the formal and conceptual idioms of jewelry form the basis of her art practice, in which the city acts as a reservoir of inspiration, a source of material, and an area of intervention, as well as a domain of reflection. She creates both self-initiated and commissioned works, and she exhibits and teaches worldwide. She studied at the Gerrit Rietveld Academie and the St Lucas School of Arts in Antwerp. Currently, she's pursuing a PhD in the arts at Hasselt University and PXL-MAD School of Arts in Hasselt, Belgium. There, she focuses on ubiquitous urban minutiae by developing a practice of noticing from a jewelry perspective. So I'll turn it over to Liesbet.
Hello, calling in from Amsterdam. Let me share my screen. Welcome. So also from Amsterdam, European side, and thank you to the Baltimore Jewelry Center for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. I'm already really inspired by the lectures I heard till now, and I look forward to introducing you to my work in relation to the topic of the event. Shane already did a small introduction, so I will repeat a couple of things, but let me check. Yes. So I was born and raised in Belgium, but since 2007 I live and work in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I always have alternated between those two countries because I studied at St Lucas in Antwerp, and I also studied at the Gerrit Rietveld Academie. And also those schools have played a role in my professional life. I've been teaching at the Rietveld Academie, doing research at St Lucas School of Arts. And I have my own practice since 2009. So in 2020, which was full COVID time, which you probably remember, I started my PhD in the arts, and it's a practice-based PhD, which means it focuses both on an artistic and a more theoretical approach. And I'm doing this at Hasselt University and PXL-MAD School of Arts, also based in Hasselt. I'm most known of this work, which is part of an ongoing series called Urban Jewellery. And it's a series in which I transform existing urban elements into large jewels they already appear to be. But I will not talk about this series, although it definitely would make sense in relation to This Must Be the Place. But I decided to take another route, and I will talk about stone. And not the typical jeweler's stones, although metaphorically there are definitely some connections, but stones made out of sand, out of mud, out of clay. And how these stones, how this material can guide us to rediscover a surrounding which is familiar to us by making use of a jeweler perspective. And it's also this line of thought that runs throughout my entire practice. It's also the topic of my PhD, because in my PhD, I try to unravel what it means to look, to walk, to work in public space as a jewelry designer. Because I believe that jewelry designers have a very specific way of looking due to their way of working, for example. Like literally being close to the work and therefore have the capacity to zoom in on details. Or another example could be to activate the significance of jewelry as one of humanity's oldest symbolic expressions. I mainly focus on the tangible world, the environment you can touch, you can manipulate, you can craft. And I'm doing this via what I call, or what I think are called dualisms, or the borrowing method. And basically what's dualisms is to integrate aspects from the canon of jewelry, such as traditional jewelry types or features like glance, directly and indirectly into a new context. So my context is public space, but you could adapt this to any other context. And another key method is is a practice of noticing from a jeweler perspective, where I zoom in on what seemingly insignificant items in public space. And I also refer to them as urban minutiae. You can also call them details. And with details, I don't mean particular small in size, but rather unnoticed. So I will show you a couple of projects, and the last two, especially, which are part of my PhD, are a combination of those methods. By focusing on something which is ubiquitous, like bricks, but bricks is an urban element which switches from highly functional to very decorative, and often is place and cultural specific. But first, I go really back to the beginning to understand how this thematical approach has grown. And therefore, I must take you to my hometown, because I spent my childhood and teenage years in this, what looks from the picture, I think, an idyllic place called Steendorp. And Steendorp, if you translate it in English, Steen is stone and Dorp is village, so stone village. And it used to be a thriving community. There was a shipyard, there were salt mills, there were a couple of breweries, and also numerous brickyards. But when I grew up there was only one brickyard remained. But it was open, you can enter it. So we could go there and we could play there. So we played there among 4 brick piles piled high, which, seen from above, formed a checkers pattern with narrow passages between them. It was a city in itself. Towering walls of bricks, separated by narrow alleys that, despite their tight street pattern, defied my powers of orientation and made me take detours. I believe, or I hope, that it's there, in the dense yet fictional town, my love of cities began. From my hometown, I'll take you to the first project that I executed in public space in 2008 in Nepal. It's called Finally They're Going to Make the Road. It took me quite some years to discover what my interest in jewelry was. I studied for 5 years, and it was really with ups and downs. And it was this project that gave me some answers. It's a project that took place in Nepal in collaboration with the Nepalese school, the Kathmandu University of Art and Design. And we were coupled with a student of the Nepalese Academy. And I had the privilege to work with Pukar Rizal. And as you probably know, Nepal is a pretty complex society with the different classes, but I was lucky because Nepal was able to take a step back and look to its own society. So we decided that we want to work after days of observation, that we want to work about something which was a combination of the religion and also how there was taking care of the daily environment. And we decided to repair a street in Kathmandu with red tiles. Why red? Red is a color of religion there. So what they do, they put small red dots in front of a shop or their house, and they believe it offers protection. So that's why we decided to integrate the color. And we worked with the craftsmen in the valley of Bhaktapur. It was a really intriguing place, which is a bit ironically doesn't exist anymore because it's totally urbanized. But they had a really traditional way of making bricks and tiles. And I think for me this is represented in this picture, because what you see in front is the tiles of the craftsmen making that have made them, and this unorganized lines of tiles are the ones from me and Pukar. So I think this image tells a lot. So this is how they bake their bricks. They pile them up in small houses. It's a sort of oven. They set it on fire for 3 days. and they let it cool down for 7 days. So it's really based on knowledge and experience, their way of working. We installed the work at night with friends and also with teachers. So the collaboration was really important. And yeah, I could never have done such a project without them. And yeah, especially without Bukar. And so this is the final result of one of the halls that we repaired. And it was for me the first time I worked in public space, and that in combination with jewelry still forms the base of my artistic practice. And I think this is not jewelry, but I think it's a lot about like what jewelry is about, the care or the attention that is given to, yeah, in this case, a street, a place. From my first artwork in public space, I jumped to Streets and Stones, an object of 2000, which I made in 2019. And Streets and Stones is not a work in the public domain, but it's a work that reacts on it. So through my practice, I've also doing research how to bring the work I do on the street to another context, like gallery or a museum. And so for me, this work was one of the first works where I was kind of happy with, where I thought I succeeded. And the starting point is yeah, you probably all know this image, is the way a mineral grows and how that is translated scientifically. So you may minerals actually grow quite geometrically, and they are, yeah, think of diamond, like two pyramids on top of each other, and they're composed of crystals that have a crystalline structures. There are 7 groups, of which 6 groups have a very specific growth direction based on the axis of the crystals. And there's also an amorphous group. It's a group of minerals without this organized crystalline structure, such as amber or opal. And at the beginning of the 19th century, there was this mineralogist, René Just Houet, who made this really intriguing collection of Pearwood crystallographic models. These are scientific models. He made 589 in total, and they're very accurate crystal shapes linked to their elemental structure. He made them in collaboration with a carpenter, and most important is their accuracy of design, really like the 1/10 of a millimeter, because they're really intended as scientific research at a time when there were no better existing methods of measurement. And this line of thinking and also the form language I translated to the streetscape by using materials which I link to public space. So this is an overview of the box. There is a model of brick. There's one of a traffic sign. The blue one on top of the picture is one made of an enameled traffic sign. I also have made one of the reflective tape, which they use nowadays for traffic signs. You see asphalt, barrier tape. I also made one of the lenses of traffic lights. So there is a red one, a green one, and an orange one. The orange one is still on top. And yeah, interesting for me was that each material had its own specific properties and also its own method of processing. So my interpretation is a wooden box filled with models made of urban materials. And I think this work touches on so many levels of my interest, how it connects jewelry and the city, how it functions as a material library, how each material requires its own modus operandi, and how it thematically refers to a component of the jewelry canon. So this was like before I started my PhD. This is the work I made during my PhD, and it's called Medallion. It's an unwearable pendant mortared with miniature bricks, and it was a work I made for a question I got to participate in an exhibition at Galerie Marseille to commemorate fellow jewellery designer and colleague Lucie Sarneel, which I hope you know her work, otherwise look it up. And Lucy was interested in the relation between the private and the public space, and I tried to explore that relation, also the relation between jewelry and the built environment, by making this pendant out of these miniature bricks. Here you see the work at the exhibition. And I always have considered it like probably if you have your own practice, you know, this in-between works. But yeah, looking back, it has triggered something. At that time, I was very much struggling with the miniature aspect of it. And I also thought that the shape, which is a photo medallion, which is something that Lucy worked with quite often, I thought, okay, it's relevant for her work, but what is its meaning in my work? And so this pendant led me to this series called Brick by Brick. So I decided to work with a real brick, which can be considered as an archetypal element of the city. And it's an unusual material to work with in jewelry. I think maybe Kerianne can confirm this. Although it's part of the craft, I think, to make a piece of jewelry out of a material that at first glance is not workable, if you think of a diamond. And what I also find interesting to explore is the unexpected history of such an urban material. Concrete, for example, is really considered a modern material, but it's actually the industry and the invention of reinforced concrete that is modern. The earliest recordings of concrete structures date back to 8,600 before Christ in the regions of Syria and Jordan. And actually the same goes for bricks, which dates back to 7,000 before Christ, when Turks laid mud bricks in the sun to harden. So Brick by Brick is a series of pendants carved from slices of bricks. And what I do is I isolate and manipulate a single fabricated brick by zooming in on its materiality and functionality. And for me, one of the consequences is a visual and intrinsic magnification of its qualities and flaws, such as, and then I go back to these little tiny sparking pebbles that provide strength, but normally remain invisible, or these embedded cracks that create a certain, most ineffectively, fragility in combination with the unusual thinness of the slabs. The shapes of the pendants are trowels to lay bricks or to plaster wall. This is me drawing all the shapes in the hardware store. And what I also find interesting, that's these shapes resulting, or the shapes are also reminiscence of shields or amulets that have a particular protective meaning within jewelry. Here you see a photo of the work in progress. Each pendant has a hand-woven cord, and I used a Japanese braiding technique called kumihimo. And besides it's an aesthetic choice, you can choose color, texture, structure. I think it's also part of this attention to detail, to time, which is this time-consuming, labor-intense craft-related actions. And I think the work benefits from it very much. So I explore the manual gesture related to craftsmanship. It's something that tends to be overlooked when experiencing a city. So that's one aspect. And another aspect is scale and proportion by maneuvering between city and jewelry. So in this work, I really try to push the limits of material to reveal meaning. So the brick, which is actually a building in the making, and it's normally surrounded by dust and grit, is given a kind of softness and fragility that is brought out by deploying an intimate practice such as jewellery design. And by making use of a long history and traditions of jewelry, it allows the wearer to touch the city through the brick crafted into a pendant, to experience jewelry and experience the city. So these are some images of the exhibition I participated in Munich Jewelry Week together with my colleagues Maria Conchake and Charlotte van Houwbroek. The last project I want to show you is non-ornamental. And actually, I don't know really if that's the title because it's a work in progress and I've presented it already 3 times, more informal, I must say, and then it already had 3 different titles. So yeah, I will show this in Munich Jewelry Week next upcoming Munich Jewelry Week. So maybe it will have a different title again. But it makes use of, I'm not sure what's the correct English word, but I think it's clay bricks or hollow bricks. These are ceramic perforated bricks to build both load-bearing and non-load-bearing walls of the building structure. They're, in comparison to normal bricks, they're extra large. And they have a very specific design which requires less raw material and also results in a simpler production process. This is some technical information, but it's basically part of the whole concept. So the benefits of this type of bricks are their improved thermal resistance and they have a lower cost of masonry. But on the other hand, they're not frost resistant. So this means they can't be used for exterior walls. So consequently, although they occupy a significant place in the built environment, and that I must say is at least in Belgium and France, is a really, you don't see them everywhere, but I know they're used in most construction works. These bricks are never visible. So they're also referred to as non-decorative bricks or bricks for non-decorative masonry. But I personally think that there is like a tremendous ornamental potential in this building material. And to bring that out, I focused on the clay bricks with finger holes, which makes them more manageable and make it easier for the masons to position them. So that's the only function that these holes have. And what I often do also in my other work, I connect the concept of diswearability to the archetypal signet ring. And I must say this has been more like an intuitive decision, although you can think that it's a much more masculine piece of jewelry, but I must say I didn't delve into that topic yet. So this combination of this type of bricks with signet rings, and what I did is I stretched them or I compressed them so they fit the size of the clay brick. So the work makes the viewer look or re-look again at a city in the making or a city in progress, at ubiquitous but subordinated urban elements, at hidden crafts and hidden artisans. And for me, the work meanders between this almost poetic eloquence and also this progressive power of progress. So till now, I have 5 different rings. I have 2 different rings, and the idea is to make 5 different, to use 5 different stones to make 5 rings, because each stone leads to a different design. So please, when you're in Munich Jewelry Week, visit me to see how the final project will look like. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liesbet. Super interesting. Maria saying thank you too. I couldn't help but think about breeze blocks with those rings that I just saw, which is like pretty common. And, like,
yeah.
Um,
I was a bit nervous, so I hope it was.
no, you did a great job.
Sometimes I was stumbling onwards. So yeah.
You're getting lots of compliments. I'll start with a question, and hopefully that will give people a little bit of time to any questions they might have. I'm curious about the physical experience of working with the brick, because I'm sure you probably do some. I would assume that it's pleasant maybe when it's like in its like wet form, but like for me personally, I find brick to be like a surface that like I don't like the feeling of. I'm wondering if that's if you feel the same, if you don't feel the same, like how you relate to it. I know you've worked with so many different materials. You've worked with concrete before, so that has some similarities. But yeah, how are you experiencing the actual the feeling of working with the material?
Yeah. Yeah. So like figuring out how to do it is
well, that
really
could be part of it. I just wonder, I mean, I guess I'm asking, do you like working with it? It just seems like when you go in and cut it or even sand it or file it, like it could be
yeah,
difficult.
it's very dirty work. Like it's dust. It's especially with the large brick size. It's like yeah, the size I use a grinder to craft them into, or to make them turn them into these rings. It's really dirty work, so I can't say on a day like, okay, let's do this. I really have to kind of almost mentally prepare to do this kind of work. But the thing is that you also learn the material and appreciate the material. You discover things like different types of stone. Like some are so hard you can't work with it. Others one are really like soft like butter. So I think, yeah, manipulating the material is part of the work. And what I find interesting, or for me, was a discovery, like with the brick by brick series, because that's jewelry, you can hold it. Then it becomes like a different material because it comes very soft, very like almost silky surface, which is kind of contradictory to the original brick, which is can be a bit more rough to touch. But also what I find interesting is something that you hardly touch with your bare hands or with your skin, because when you walk through the city, you're wearing shoes, and so that switch from touching it to untouching, I also thought was interesting.
Sorry about that. That's muted. Christina says that she loves the relationship of amulet to tool and the final form work of the pieces. There's an interesting relationship to fit happening in your work, showing an interesting relationship to fit happening in your work, showing in an expansive way, the customizing of the brick patch in the road. Yeah, it's very much like someone who might construct something.
Mm.
Katya says, I love how the scale of the brick pieces affects what we notice about them. Yeah. That preciousness of intimate scale suddenly makes all the inclusions and imperfections appear. Thank you so much for sharing your research. Margot says, there's so many layers of construction and deconstruction to this work. How do you feel your influence is on material? Are you a deconstructor or a constructor, or are you both?
I think I deconstruct to construct. So I think what I do is I isolate like one element, which is so in that sense I kind of deconstruct, because a brick, we all know a brick, but we mainly experience it in when it's a building, or when it's a wall, or when it's a city. And so by isolating, you kind of you deconstruct it basically. So yeah.
A couple more. So Mary says, thank you. I agree. These non-ornamental bricks, especially the interior structures, are very visually appealing and lend themselves to jewelry. Carrie Ann says, I'm a fan. I'm so happy to see you at the BJC. Can you talk more about the fragility of the brick material and how you think through function and wearability? Is it okay for it to fall apart when worn? Is that chance or risk part of it for you? Something I also had to come to terms with, and thank you for the shout out.
I was actually surprised how strong they are, because I did some research in how thin I could go with the slabs, or the how to cut, and I could go down to like 5 millimeter, and I even without breaking them, and I actually put quite some pressure on top of them to sandpaper them. So for me, there's this strange contradiction between their appearance, their fragility, but also to bring out like what makes them so strong. And I also dropped one and it didn't break, so I have good hopes. Yeah.
That's good. I mean, that's a success.
Yeah, so I think it also depends on because you have like bricks which are very, very soft when they don't have any inclusions. Maybe they're like, they're easier to work with, but maybe they're also more fragile.
Mary Fazell said, I wondered if you might say more about how your childhood experiences playing in old, disused brickyards shape how you think or feel about brick as a material. And have you ever done bricklaying, or is the brick more of a material substance?
I looked into a course to learn bricklaying, and I was, but it's a really difficult craft, people tell me. So that's something which is on my to-do list. So I haven't done that before. But what I also, for example, discovered is there's so many tips of bonds, like how they, like the structure, how they're piled. It's like, that's also something I really like, that when you work with a certain material, which is like not a very typical jewelry material, it opens up like a whole different world of craftsmanship, but of techniques, of different ways of working. Because my original idea was to make these very large pendants where where I could use this bricklaying knowledge. And the other question.
Yeah.
No, there's like no direct relation. It was actually through this lecture that I find this thread, which seems quite obvious, but that's always how it goes, with this relation between taking stone as a material to tell something. Because most of the time I take my public artworks as like this line of line in my work. But what the brickyard is abandoned nowadays, and ironically, it's now totally like closed off, so you can't enter. It was also, looking back, it was quite it was quite strange that we were allowed to play there, because we really climb up, putting our feet between, like in the pallets, and then so we tear the plastic so we could climb up, and then we jumped from one square to the other. So it was but that's more it works more the other way around. Working with brick brought me back to my childhood, and also the area, the location where I grew up. There were many brickyards. It's also a clay, like there's a specific ground. I'm not sure if you say that. So it's so also it could bring me far, because the landscape also is formed by the ground, which is very dense.
Jay's coming with a good question. There's something really compelling in the way that you take, presumably, mass manufactured construction materials and undertake these labor intensive cutting and carving processes with them. Can you talk more about the way you see your own labor informing the material?
yeah, because it's a material that has its own will. So especially with the large, with the hollow bricks, the material actually guides me. And with the bricks, I had the idea it was more the other way around, that I guided the material. So it's also a very slow process in which, like every cut you make plays a role in how the final design will look like.
Christina came in with some experience from her time laying bricks. She found the material to have a remarkable absence of resilience. And by that, she means that when you push against it, you're pushing back on yourself. So you can feel the work in your bones a day later. There's something kind of remarkable about the inherently skeletal property of the material. And I wonder if you've encountered that as well.
What's skeletal property? What does she mean by that?
Christina, do you want to chime in?
Meaning that like it's a building block of a larger picture, you know. It's a spine in a way, as a shape. But I always felt like I could, like the echo that it had in my body a day later was very real. It almost like induced a form of arthritis in a way. But I'd never encountered that with stones, that when you push against something, you're pushing back on yourself. Have you encountered that?
Not really, no. Because I cut into them, or I use like heavy material or heavy tools to manipulate them. And I think it's something different when you position themselves, and there's like one relates to the other, and so I don't do that. For me, there's like no relation to other bricks. So yeah, I do feel it in my bones and my muscles, but more because it's so heavy with the heavy tools and also your. But yeah, that's also something which is known, that when you're like the bodies of these people laying these streets or doing bricks, or they're like they suffer a lot. And I think they also can retire like really, really early due to the hard labor they're doing. So that's something I can recall. Yeah.
Carrie Adonis, who's joining us from Vancouver, I believe, says, thinking maybe about your urban jewelry project, which I love. What are the challenges of going about day-to-day life when you're always noticing the overlooked things and seeing public spaces as a jewelry maker?
Yeah, good question. For me, but maybe it works for people. It works differently for other people. But for me, it's really a mindset. So I can kind of almost switch my mind to like working while walking, or and not working while walking. And sometimes it's our small encounters which bounce back. And what I've also been doing, which can be interesting to tell, is in my PhD, I also started doing walking interviews with people who also look at public space from a very specific profession. So I did a walk with an urban geologist, and that was also kind of interesting to learn how people experienced or noticed the city, not doing anything with it, but just observing and then sharing those knowledge with me. So that was also kind of interesting.
Elliot says, you're also... through altering these bricks, you're also revealing a structure that's never meant to be seen, which kind of reminds me of Christina's work. And he also says, it's interesting to note the lack of resilience of brick, Christina. Bricks stacked can hold thousands of tons, but the load strength in the opposite direction is less than 100 pounds or something. Yeah. Are there any other questions that could be related to, connected to any of our speakers or all of our speakers? Y'all have been really great with the questions today.